Hello, welcome to this episode of New Cars TV. I'm your host, Andre Clemente. In front of us, we have the latest Ford Thunderbird in its most potent form, the 190 horsepower Turbo Coupe. Now that name has been around since 1983, but this current iteration debuted last year as an 87 model, employing an engine that's nearly identical, if not slightly improved, to the SVO Mustang. On paper, it's got all the right ingredients: 240 foot-pounds of torque, air-to-air intercooler from the SVO, slick 5-speed, rear-wheel drive limited slip diff with a 355 rear end, brakes and sway bars from the Mustang GT, and finally, anti-lock brakes. This car has more power and better power-to-weight ratio than the Monte Carlo SS, and it's even the first American car to feature a computerized self-adjusting suspension. Now, where most automakers typically spend around $100 million on a mid-cycle refresh, Ford spent $250 million on updates to ensure that the 87 and 88 Turbo Coupe are the best in their class. Question is, did they invest in all the right places? Have they addressed all the weaknesses of the outgoing model? Or is this just nothing more than the bigger, heavier, slower Mustang? Now that we have the keys to the shiny new 88 model, we're going to find out. Coming up on this episode of New Cars TV, stick around. You know, this thing may be riding on the aging Fox body platform, but the Thunderbird happens to have the widest track of all the Fox body cars, especially the Mustang. We're talking over 58 inches wide, both front and rear. Now, the Thunderbird also happens to have one of the longest wheelbase of all the Fox body cars. It struggles a bit with the small, tight, slow corners, and it can't turn into sharper maneuvers easy as the short wheelbase Mustang, for example, which is much more agile through these cones. But, well, the Mustang can pull 0.84G here in the skid pad. This Thunderbird can manage 0.82. That's pretty damn close. In fact, that's better than cars like the Nissan 300ZX. Also, I can't tell you how much this shifter just makes the driving experience. It's accurate, precise, and it feels shorter and tighter than the one in the Mustang. I love it. Now, the Turbo Coupe might not cut it as a cone slayer, but at least it can slide. One of the standard features is the limited slip differential. That means you can do this. Thank God for that diff. Can't imagine how boring this car would be without a limited slip. And yes, the steering is horribly over-assisted, but at least you get the quick steering rack from the Mustang GT, which is a 15-to-1, and it is quick. The steering wheel only requires 2.4 turns lock to lock, so it doesn't require that much work to get it pointed where you want to go. You also notice that Turbo Coupes get the larger 16-inch wheel, but with the 225/60 tire that was used in the previous model. Now, this is the first 16-inch tire we've seen that has a sidewall height larger than 55. That means you have well over 5 inches of sidewall on a 16-inch wheel. But I gotta tell you, at the limit, these tires really hold the car back. And I mean, I get it. Big wheels and tires are engineered for a supple, smooth ride, but come on. When you got a 5-speed and a crude, noisy, race-tuned turbo engine, then a pedal set that was designed for heel toe. Don't you want the tires to match? I sense a bit of an identity crisis here. Now, it does work in your favor when you're trying to catch a slide, because there is absolutely no snap oversteer whatsoever. These huge sidewalls just want to roll over themselves when you reach that aggressive slip angle, kind of like a bi-supply tire. And the result is this calm, if not sluggish, transition. The limits are so low and easy to manage. It might be sloppy, but it's hard not to have fun. Well, at least at low speeds. Right now we're going to ditch the skid pad and see what happens when you really stretch its legs.
Wow, not the lap time I was hoping for. I was expecting to be sliding around a lot more, but the problem is that I'm almost never in full boost coming out of a corner. The gear ratios just aren't optimized for this engine. Like here, coming uphill to turn 2, third gear doesn't have enough torque. I'm too low in the rev range. The downshifting to second puts me at red line, where I have to immediately shift back up to third, costing me time. With all the elevation changes here at Sears Point, having the wrong gear ratios can have a drastic effect on your lap times. It's a shame, because in the real world, this car feels much faster than the lap time suggests.
Car loves to rotate under hard braking, so you gotta be very careful. Be very smooth with that brake application. Oh, lots of nosedive. Nose wants to kiss the ground. Unexpected for a luxury car. Just want to talk about brake fade real fast. You definitely experience it around the third or fourth lap of each session. Now, as a safety precaution, we always upgrade to high temperature brake fluid. It's a safety issue. We don't want the pedal going to the floor at any point. But yeah, with fade coming in that early, I suspect these brakes are a little small for this car, which is very plausible, considering these brakes were engineered for the Mustang, a car that weighs up to 500 pounds less than the Turbo Coupe. So definitely something to keep in mind. Now, just because they're undersized doesn't mean they can't stop this thing properly. The electro-hydraulic four-wheel ABS system, with its massive reservoir, is one of the most advanced on the market. It'll actually bring the car to a stop from 55 miles an hour in just 110 feet, nearly identical to the Porsche 911. But these small rotors can only do it so many times before overheating, and that's where bigger rotors will come into play. Alright, we had other issues. This new grillless bumper might be more aerodynamic than ever, but it severely reduced airflow to the radiator. We experienced overheating around the fourth lap or so. Nothing wrong with the cooling system. That 2.3 in the SVO has been heavily track tested, so it's not like that engine is incapable. Looking at the front of the car, there's clearly not enough airflow for track duty or any sort of high performance driving. The old Thunderbird had a grill. Even SVO, raced in SCCA showroom stock, that had a small opening for a grill. But for the 87 and 88 Thunderbirds, Ford blocked off everything completely without any apparent upgrade to the cooling system. So definitely keep that in mind if you tend to track this thing or do any sort of high performance driving. It's definitely going to be an obstacle for you. Pedals are great, very good for heel toe. The brake is nice and close to the gas pedal. The shifter feels fantastic. That was a checkered flag. Gotta admit, I'm kind of relieved this day is over. I had fun, but not sure how much more this car can take. Bob Bondurant just purchased 10 of these cars from Ford to use here at Sears Point at his driving school. That tells you something. Obviously, those cars are prepped, but the chassis is capable. I have to say, for a luxury car with 60 series sidewall, I'm very impressed with this car. Steering was okay, like I said, just a little over-assisted, but overall, a very capable car. I even remember hearing rumors back in 83 or 84 when Jackie Stewart apparently lapped Laguna Seca in a Thunderbird 2 seconds faster than the BMW 6 Series. Obviously, I was a bit skeptical, but you know what? After a full track day in this car, I wouldn't hesitate to have a go against that BMW. Alright, here's the test that really matters. How does the Turbo Coupe perform on the road where 99% of its owners will use it? I've been pretty harsh on the tires up until this point, saying they're only good for ride comfort. After putting several hundred miles on this thing the past 2 weeks, I gotta tell you, they're more than just good. They're exceptional, even on these rough California roads. The big sidewall manages to soak up uneven pavement without spoiling all the fun when the road gets twisty. Now, for a car that's as long as a Mercedes S-Class, it's surprisingly nimble and responsive through here. Also, there is a bit of body roll, but there's more than enough grip. And there's no understeer. It is shocking how well this car rides the 101 freeway. It absorbs ride impacts and imperfections superbly without getting unsettled. You can actually hear it swallowing potholes in the background with this faint little gulp. Everything's just so well damped and muted. It's hard to imagine it would ride even nicer if it had an independent rear suspension. But it doesn't, so occasionally you get that live axle shudder in the back when a rear wheel goes over a bump. Also, you'd be surprised to know that all this goodness is happening in firm mode. The other option is auto mode, which automatically transitions between firm and comfort. It's supposed to make the car even more supple during regular driving. yet stiff under aggressive maneuvers or high-speed cornering. It's a pretty complex system. It actually monitors your steering angle, throttle position, speed, and turbo boost. Now, when you exceed a certain threshold within one of those circuits, the system firms up instantly. It sounds great on paper, but the problem is that it makes the car too floaty when in comfort mode. Remember, floaty isn't always more comfortable. Quite frankly, it's hard to maintain composure when you're floating. The steering becomes less responsive to inputs, and it feels unstable to the point where it's unnerving to drive fast. And for that reason, I leave it in the firm setting almost all the time. It's more than supple enough. Trust me, it's comfortable, and it's better suited to this car's sporty nature. Overall, these shocks are great tech. Definitely the right idea. I think the range is a bit limited, and I think it's biased too much towards the comfort end of the spectrum. Auto mode needs to be less floaty, and firm mode needs to be slightly sportier. About this engine. The turbo systems that we're all accustomed to typically reach boost mechanically almost instantly, kind of like an on-off switch. Think of the 911 Turbo. It forces automakers to limit boost to around 10 psi to avoid possible engine damage during low RPM operation. And it makes sense. Imagine getting all 15 pounds of boost right at 3,500 when you're coming out of a corner. It's quite a handful. But the electronic system in this car, derived from the SVO, that comes on slowly at low RPM and then infinitely varies the boost as RPM rises. Think of it as a form of variable boost control. And when you have this much control over boost, you can have more of it. 15 pounds is the highest for any production engine at the time when the SVO came out. Quite frankly, it's higher than what the Porsche 959 puts out. Remember, this is the most powerful engine in its class. No turbo car from Volvo, Saab, Audi, or Chrysler comes within 15 horsepower of this thing. Now, as mentioned earlier, the transmission ratios are too widely spaced for a turbo engine. They're clearly intended for a V8 car. Shifting from third to fourth at wide open throttle yields a drop of over 2,000 RPM. You fall from 5,500 to less than 3,500, and at that point, boost is only in the single digits, so you have to wait to build it back up. Plus, the gearing feels too tall for this motor. Anything below 3,500 RPM and it struggles to accelerate. Remember, you take away the turbo and you're left with a 4-cylinder engine from the Pinto. So when you're asking it to move a 3,500 pound car, guess what? It can't. And yes, you'll experience lag in any turbo car. At least in those other cars, you get full boost when it comes on. So now we need to answer the question we asked at the beginning of the video. Did Ford invest the money in all the right places? Unfortunately, my answer is no. Now, don't get me wrong, all these improvements have made this the best driving Thunderbird ever. However, the number one complaint people had about the outgoing model was a lack of engine refinement. That Turbo 4 was rough, coarse, and unrefined, and it still is. When you approach 3,000 RPM, that turbo is beginning to spool up, and you get this awful drone that resonates throughout the cabin. It sounds like the engine's working harder than it actually is, like you're straining it at 3,000 RPM. It has to be the most annoying trait about this car, because the only way to get it to shut up is to upshift early. And all that does is drop you far enough in RPM where there's just no usable power at that point. There's nothing but lag. I mean, this engine just isn't suitable for a vehicle of this caliber. It's barely forgivable in a Mustang, let alone a premium Grand Touring machine like this. It's unacceptable. A smooth, quiet engine would have been a game changer for this car. Yet Ford spent very little on engine refinement despite all the money they had available to them in last year's update. Now, you've heard it from all the other journalists, so I won't get too deep into it, but this engine needs a balanced shaft. All big 4 cylinders like this 2.3 require a balanced shaft to offset the harsh vibrations and run smoothly. Ford omitted the balance shaft, saying it wasn't financially feasible to add one this late in the production run. Whatever, Ford. You know what did get a balance shaft this year? The V6 model. That's right, all V6 Thunderbirds get a balance shaft for 1988. Not the Turbo Coupe. And honestly, the reason is simple. This car is being replaced next year with a Thunderbird Super Coupe, which uses a supercharged V6 engine. So of course the V6 is going to get a balance shaft as it's going to live on, but not this 4-cylinder. This is the last year of the Turbo. God, I really want to love this car. It's just so unique. There's nothing else in the market like it. Nothing. Nothing pairs a motorsport-derived turbo engine and a 5-speed with a supple ride and road manners that rival that of German sedans. It's just that while it excels in so many key areas, there's too many little things, frustrating little things that hold it back. All this NVH just leaves a sour taste in your mouth after a nice drive. So in the end, I have to ask myself, could I live with this every day? No. I'd get tired of it.